Welcome back to our partnership and joint venture tips video series. This is part 3. I'm going to talk about setting objectives and defining roles within your partnerships. So let's first discuss the idea of setting objectives. The very first thing you want to do here is make sure that you have individual goals and outcomes. And you discuss these with your partner and vice versa. You want to make sure you know what their goals and outcomes are. Because each person is going to come into this thing with a different perspective, a different view of the world, and different things they want to gain from this. I mean, the idea of a partnership is that everybody can mutually gain and benefit and advance their life and their business. So making sure that's right wide out in the open is very, very important. And you can break these down into different categories. So for example, you might want to look at your goals at a financial level. You might want to look at your goals in terms of the number of contacts or the number of new customers that you acquire, a certain skill that you want to maybe learn from your partner. Maybe your partner is really, really good at tech and web design. You want to pick up some of those skills because you need some of that in your business, or vice versa. All of that can play a role, and all of that should be stated as goals for you. And then everybody can make sure they work towards achieving all of those things within the dynamic of the JV. And then another thing is to understand personal motivators. Now, this is a little bit more of a, not gray area, so to speak, but it's harder to define, let's say that. Because each person won't necessarily come out and tell you, I'm motivated by A, B, C, and D, and what are you motivated by? And you make a list and you check things off to make sure you're staying motivated. It's more of something you kind of have to learn about each other. And by looking at your partner, by having conversations with your partner or partners, you can sort of examine their psychology and start to identify the things that get them excited, that motivate them, that make them feel a higher level of energy versus a lower level of energy. And you can actually study their rhythms. What are the type of things that you talk about, or the activities that you work on with them, or that they work on, that make them very productive and put them in a good headspace versus what brings them down, and how can you bring the best out of them. So understanding what their motivators are, but also knowing in your own head what gets you motivated. Do you enjoy the challenge? Do you like being the person to step up to the plate when a problem hits and you're the one to solve that problem? And you call the shots and you make the decisions. And maybe your partner is really motivated by you doing that, and they really enjoy the to-do list that you give them to solve the problems, right? Each person is going to have a different dynamic that they operate within. But it's very important that you understand it at your own level and your partner's level, what turns you on and off, and what gets you into higher and lower levels of energy and mindset. And then the most important step in all of this is to understand, how will success be measured? I mean, the default is, how much money do we make in this thing, right? This project took us 6 months to build, and we've been selling it for the last 3 months, and we've only made X number of dollars. We wanted to make more than that, but maybe there's more to it than just the money that you made, right? Maybe, like I said earlier, maybe there's a certain number of clients that you want to acquire. Or maybe there's, depending on the type of business you're in, maybe there's a certain company that you wanted to get your name in front of, and now they know who you are because of this joint venture that you set up, or because of this partnership project that you've been working on. And yeah, the project only made half as much money as you want, but you got this in with this company, right? The success is going to be measured in a number of different ways. It could be new skills that you've acquired as a result of the team dynamic of working with this person. So it's very important that both you and your partner sit down and think about the different levels and different areas where success will be measured. Starting with money, obviously, you can figure out what a good amount of revenue generation should be, what your profit numbers should be in order to be a successful deal. But then go into some of the other things. I want to make sure I learn this skill. I want to make sure I talk to this many people, or build a list of this size. I want to produce this type of product, right? It's got to be of this length, of this quality. We need to have a certain level of satisfaction with our customers. Maybe our help desk needs to have tickets answered in a certain period of time. All of those things are measures of success, but you won't know if you're being successful until you've defined what your success criteria are. That's something a lot of people don't do at the beginning of a joint venture. It doesn't take a lot of time. This can be done in a half an hour on your first call, and just brainstorm it out, write it all down, and make sure it gets set. And then the next piece here is to define your JV roles. So each person is going to be playing a different role. And the last thing you want to do when you go into a partnership or a joint venture deal, the last thing you want to do is be partnering up your strengths and partner with somebody else who has the exact same skills and strengths as you, because then you're going to both want to play the same roles, and then no other roles will be filled, or somebody's going to be left filling a role that they're not really ideal to handle. So this kind of goes into something like almost before we get into this whole presentation, which is how to pick your partners. But really, you need to make sure that you're partnering with somebody who has complementary skills, and then look at your strengths and look at your talents and make sure you're taking on roles. And sometimes that means, like I said earlier in part 1 of this series, taking on more than half of the responsibility, taking on more than your quote unquote fair share. But sometimes you have to do that because your strengths and talents lend themselves to doing that. But it's okay, because if it's a good partnership, it'll all come back to you. It will serve you in the long run. But make sure that you define your roles. So if your role is to handle all the first line support with customers, you do that and you step up to the plate. If your role is to do all of the writing or create the actual products, or to work with companies to source your products, or work with vendors, if that's your role, take that role, define it as yours, and own it from start to finish. Don't wait for your partner to do any piece of it. He or she has delegated that to you entirely, just like you have delegated the other pieces to them entirely. Define those roles based on strengths and talents, and you'll be set. And then the next thing is make sure that you are flexible when it comes to working with your partner and you're willing to adapt. So there's going to be cases where your ideal role is not going to be perfectly fit here. So you're going to have to step into a role that may be outside of your comfort zone, but you're the best person for the job. And that's where flexibility comes in. So let's say you and your partner both hate accounting and numbers. You can't stand it, but there is a single role of number crunching and accounting that needs to happen on this project for it to be successful. It doesn't really make sense for both people to do it, because then it's a wasted effort and both people are being drawn away from the things that they naturally do well. So maybe it's your job, because you're a little bit better, a little bit more capable of handling this thing. Step up to the plate, be flexible, and say, look, this role is not filled. I'll fill it because I'm better for the job than my partner. It's not ideal. I don't love doing it. But in the grand scheme of things, it's better for me to do that, because if my partner does it, they're even worse for the job than me, and we're gonna fall even further behind. So you have to make decisions, and sometimes you have to make sacrifices in order to make this partnership work. And you know that already. As an entrepreneur, you know that a lot of your tasks on a day-to-day basis are not things you love doing. Some things you just have to do. And the same thing goes with partnerships. So if you're flexible and you're willing to step into a role that may be outside of your comfort zone, you're setting the leadership role again. Your partner, I should say, will be more willing to do the same and reciprocate in other situations, right? You can even remind them, hey, don't forget, I stepped into this accounting role. It wasn't really my deal. Now here's something else I need you to step up for. And they'll be way more likely to agree to that because you led the way by be willing to doing it first. Very, very important. So in summary, this whole thing comes down to communication. You want to make sure that you communicate with your partners as often as possible, and to do within a template that everybody understands. And that starts with knowing your goals and picking your success criteria and being willing to sacrifice and be flexible, just like we talked about. If everybody's expectations are accounted for and discussed before committing, then you're setting yourself up for great success, and then you can work through it with your partners and as you grow, and hopefully your projects are so successful that your excitement will override any of the frustrations that you feel when it comes to doing some of the stuff that we discussed. We'll see you in the next video.